Welcome back to the Cinema Club podcast. My name is Christopher Amick, and I'll be your host for today's episode. The Cinema Club is like a book club, but for movies. Every episode, Nick Leach or myself invite one member of the Cinema Club to be a co-host for that week who will choose the movie and join Nick or I on the podcast to talk about the film. Today we are covering the 2013 film Mud, directed by Jeff Nichols. The film runs just over 2 hours, and Rotten Tomato boasts an 80% audience score and an incredibly rare 97% critic score. With all that being said, let's get into it.
There are things you can get away with in this world, and there are things you can't.
Galen said it's been here a while. He thinks the last flood did it. There it is.
Who else knows about this?
Just me and Galen.
Good. This boat's ours. Someone's here.
What?
Someone's living in our boat.
You know that guy?
I've never seen him before.
What'd you say, boys?
You got crosses in your heels.
Nails, shaped like crosses.
What for?
Ward off evil spirits. I'm waiting on my girlfriend. She got these birds tattooed on her hands here. Nightingales. Good luck, birds.
I just can't spend the rest of my life running away with him.
She don't care about nobody but herself. Hey, stuck off in that island because of her.
Ma'am, have you seen this man?
No, sir.
Son, have you?
What'd he do?
This river brings a lot of trash down it. You gotta know what's worth keeping and what's worth letting go.
You never said your name.
Mud. You can call me Mud. We'll try getting this boat in the water. It's my best shot. I made a list of things we're gonna need.
You boys need to watch yourself. What Mud's into is something you don't want to be involved in.
I got a lot of folks looking for me.
Keep lying! You hear me, trash? Where is that?
He's not dangerous.
Sounds like the state troopers think different.
We're gonna pray for the death of the man who killed my son.
Y'all been good to me. You're the only friends I got out here.
You did it for her? Protect her?
Don't expect any help from me.
We got too much riding on this.
You know you don't know him, right?
What have you been doing?
Everything you told me was a lie!
It's a hell of a thing, ain't it? It's a hell of a thing.
And welcome back to the Cinema Club. Really excited to dive into this episode today. I have Nick Leach. You all know Nick by now, obviously. One of my best friends. How's it going, Nick?
Hey everybody, it's good to be back on the other side this time as a guest. So yeah, it's great. I'm glad to be on. Thanks for inviting me, Chris, for your episode.
Absolutely. And we also have Justin joining today. And Justin's been on the show before. The three of us were covering the Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus series as that was launching last year. So really happy to have you back, Justin.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be back.
Awesome. And yeah, I did want to ask you, Justin, you were the one that kind of came forward and chose today's film, Mud. I just kind of wanted to ask you, what made you choose this movie for today's podcast episode?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Mud's been one of those movies that I put on my Amazon list to watch. Just kind of came. I'm just a huge Matthew McConaughey fan. I love him. I love a lot of his movies.
All right.
There you go. And, but yeah, so I just really like him. And it's one of those movies I saw him in. I saw the trailer for it and I was like, wow, that looks really interesting. And this is years ago. So I put it on the list and I just never actually watched it. For whatever reason, it just never came up as like, I'm in the mood for this movie, or I just want to watch this, or, just kind of you forget about it. I don't know. I just really felt like, we're going to sit down and watch this movie, and it's something I haven't seen. It's 9 years old. No, 10 years now, back from 2013 or something. So I was like, you know what? Yeah. Might as well. It's pretty interesting. It's different from a lot of stuff coming out nowadays. So
I also wanted to jump in and just give that spoiler warning for everybody. Just to be clear, we are going to be jumping in the spoilers here. So if you haven't already watched Mud, go ahead, pause this, jump into that film and then join us back here. But yeah, as I was saying, Mud is directed by Jeff Nichols, who is known for his work on some other critically acclaimed films, such as Take Shelter and Loving. The film was produced by Everest Entertainments and Film Nation Entertainment, and when it was released in 2012. Something I thought was really kind of interesting, just going to give some backgrounds on this film. The movie was primarily shot in Arkansas, with locations including the Mississippi River, Stuttgart, and Little Rock. And then the cinematography, that was handled by Adam Stone. And he has worked with Nichols on several of his other films. And one of the elements that I think really stands out and we'll probably dive into, today is the film's visual style. And that is very much characterized by Adam Stone, who uses a lot of natural lighting, and the use of natural landscapes is something that he heavily typically utilizes, because it really, at least to me as a viewer, kind of helps create a sense of authenticity and place. But with all that being said, did want to go ahead and jump into it. So kind of the beginning of the film opens up with Ellis, played by Ty Sheridan, and Neckbone, Jacob Laughlin, on a small motorboat. They're traveling down the Mississippi River, and Neckbone is trying to convince Ellis to go with him to a deserted island to check out a boat that has washed up there. When the boys arrive on the island, they find the boat that Neckbone was talking about. As they're exploring, they come across a makeshift hideout where they discover Mud, who is played by Matthew McConaughey. Matthew claims to have grown up nearby and tells the boy that he needs food and supplies. Returning with food, the boys ask Mud why he is hiding out. Mud is waiting for his girlfriend, Juniper, played by Reese Witherspoon, whom he describes as beautiful with nightingale tattoos on her hands. Mud promises that in exchange for their help, they can have the boat. While there, Mud talks about the anti-venom he received for the cottonmouth snake bite he got when he was younger. So I watched this movie without looking into it at all. Like I didn't watch a trailer, didn't even look up, kind of a synopsis for it. But I did jump on IMDb before I did start it up, and I had seen that both Matthew McConaughey and Reese Witherspoon were involved heavily in the film, which instantly, got my attention. Maybe that's why you had it on your watch list, Justin. I don't know if you enjoy them. I mean, I really enjoy Matthew McConaughey as both an actor and an individual, honestly. And I've been watching The Morning Show on Apple TV recently, and Reese Witherspoon is fantastic in it. Like if you guys haven't already checked that out, definitely do so.
And I want to say that in this film, I think what's really interesting is that even though it is titled Mud, which is Matthew McConaughey's character's nickname, and it also stars Reese Witherspoon, and both of them being massive actors, the story isn't about either of them, actually. It's about two young boys, which is a really interesting thing. And really, Reese Witherspoon has a relatively small part comparatively to everybody else. And so to have these massive actors being on the bill, yet being such a small, really part comparatively to, say, the two boys in the story, I thought the two boys here in Ty Sheridan and Jacob Laughlin, they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. In a very like Huck Finn, Mark Twain kind of story, it's really just about the two kids, and especially Ty Sheridan's character Ellis. I thought he did a great job. I guess not having watched this movie when it came out, over 10 years ago, but seeing him in like Ready Player One or in some of the newer X-Men movies, he's kind of getting to be a bigger actor. But seeing him here is like he's literally a kid. He's like 14 or something. That's how old the character. I don't know how old the actor was at the time, but he absolutely killed it and did a fantastic job with it. But yeah, I mean, the story really is just about these two kids getting involved in a whole bunch of bigger problems that they're really not cut out for, and just how do they work through that, and how do they survive and get to the end of it.
Yeah, and as you were saying, Ty Sheridan, he was in one more film before this called The Tree of Life with Brad Pitt, but this really was his first like main character role, and he was amazing. And I like that you brought up the whole part about Huck Finn, Adventures of Huck Finn, because on set the required reading for Ty Sheridan and Jacob Laughlin was for them to read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn during the filming, which is awesome.
Oh yeah, no, I love that. I didn't know that actually. So but it makes so much sense because that's, I mean, probably the biggest inspiration for this kind of a movie and this kind of a story. And I thought they did a great job kind of doing just a very modern kind of story like that, and we're talking about cinema, we're talking about stuff being, it's not all about like what's coming out now and stuff, but no art happens in a vacuum, right? And so we're constantly telling the same kinds of stories in different ways, and I thought this is a really well done version of that kind of a story. Two kids just out in the middle of nowhere, just being kids and getting embroiled in all sorts of shenanigans.
I also really enjoyed that even though it is set in today's day and age, we still have, little things that really make it unique. Like those characters are utilizing radios instead of like cell phones. Little things like that really kind of set up the world they're living in. And it's those kind of details that, immediately first thing in the morning, hey, I'm coming out to the river with you. Let's get out there. They're using radios instead of like texting, which I enjoyed that. And maybe that is because it's set in 2012. Not everybody had a cell phone maybe back then. But yeah, I think because of things like that, we really do see Ty Sheridan and Jacob Laughlin's characters really sometimes naive almost. We'll get to explore that obviously, but like when they find the porno magazines in the boat, for example, like at their internet, like they don't have like Pornhub pulled up on their iPhone, it's like stuff like that where I think is really interesting and really world building that they set up right away.
And the thing I love about this movie the most, even more than the story, is how much Arkansas plays a character in this film, how a part of the world that isn't very well known in popular culture, especially the South being one, but also specifically Arkansas, it really does feel a bit like a love letter for Arkansas. I mean, Jeff Nichols is from Little Rock and grew up in Little Rock, so it's an area he knew extremely well growing up, and I think that it's lovely that he took the time to use the cinematography and the shots here to take a moment here and there to sprinkle in a lot of visuals of Arkansas and the Arkansas landscape.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The cinematography just really takes you there in a really cool way because, I mean, it just opens up these beautiful panoramic views of the river and the woods, and they're in like swamp and trees and all this stuff. And it was so cool because, I mean, you really felt like you're like walking around with these kids, just like, oh, like, hey, don't step there, there's a bunch of snakes, or like, hey, like, one of my favorite parts, I think, of the whole movie was when they're coming out of the Little River and they're going into the Mississippi, and they're actually kind of like scared about it because it's the Mississippi River, right? And you kind of see, from these kids' perspective, but more closer to reality, like, hey, this is a massive river, and what was it, Neckbone? He tells Ellis, he's like, man, like, hey, your dad's going to kill us if he finds out what we're doing. He's like, I'm not worried about my dad killing us. And I was just like, man, like, that was so cool. And seeing them, take that to the island and just seeing it from their perspective and really being in the boat with them, and that was just so cool. And I mean, I didn't grow up in, Arkansas. I didn't grow up on a river, but I grew up in small town country Texas. But it's weird how similar some of those things kind of are. But it just kind of took me back when I was a kid, running around the woods with my buddy. We'd get up to all sorts of stuff like that too. We didn't have like radios, but we were kind of acting like, playing Army or this or that or whatever. But yeah, it just kind of took me back to that as a kid, and it was so cool. Just watching that and just seeing these kids in a totally different environment, but it's still feeling relatable and still feeling very, very close to home.
Well said. And I think setting up the world was really well done, and seeing Matthew McConaughey's character fits into that world so well. Because I, as a viewer, I really was like, what kind of character is Matthew McConaughey going to be playing exactly? And I just love the introduction of him with that cigarette that's, about to go out and that little pink fishing pole, a really unique character that's in this world that Ellis and Neckbone run into. And I just really appreciated how they introduced his character. I think that was really well done. Later on, Ellis punches an older kid who is confronting a girl he likes named May Pearl. Ellis and Neckbone also spot Juniper in a grocery store. Ellis returns to the island to deliver more food to Mud, and while there, Mud goes into detail about why he loves Juniper.
I really love this story because it's such a different take on a story structure, because you have these two boys. It's a coming of age story, and you could go down the route of just a regular coming of age story of them dealing with their loves, dealing with the rejection, dealing with heartbreak, all that kind of stuff. But they then get thrown into an older grown-up love story and are caught in this tragic story of these two long lost lovers who are in a lot of trouble. I thought it was just such a unique storyline that they put us in this movie.
Yeah, I love Mud's character. Like I just do. I loved him. You know, I mean, like I say, you first time you see him, he's just like sitting on the beach and he's fishing with this little Dollar Tree, pink and flowered fishing pole, and just the way that felt so lived in. But yeah, and then just seeing kind of that story unfold, and the worst part about it too is like I knew exactly what it was all about. I knew exactly what kind of story that was going to be, and not in a way that like they didn't tell it well, but in a way that like I'm familiar with those kind of stories. Like I've known people who did stuff like that. I've known people who, had similar stories that were just tragic and kind of awful and just really bad luck, and I just kind of knew that. And I was like, but it was still a story that like had me captivated, had me like wanting to see and like hoping it was going to be better. And hoping, kind of like the kids were, like the whole time Ellis is just like, okay, we're going to help this guy because, I believe in this. And I've kind of found myself hoping for the same thing, like hoping for a better ending than what I thought was going to happen.
And I love the similarities between Mud and Ellis. I think that Mud really sees a bit of himself in Ellis. And I think that's partly why he really like tries to get Ellis to help him out.
Yeah, he just kind of looks at him. He's like, I like you two boys. Remind me of me. I'm just like, all right, that's cool.
100%. Also, can we take a second to talk about the prices of food in that grocery store? When Ellis and Neckbone are snooping on Juniper, I mean, it was like $3, $3.30 for a bag of chips, $1 for some of that canned chili / Beanie Weenie.
Beanie Weenie. I'm pretty sure Beanie Weenie like sponsored this movie because it shows up in like so many scenes. It's great. What's really fun, I've got cans of Beanie Weenies in my cabinet right now. I was like, that is survival food.
That or Piggly Wiggly. I mean, Piggly Wiggly, such a like quintessential Southern thing.
Oh yeah, I grew up with a Piggly Wiggly a quarter mile from my house.
Yeah, 2012 had some better grocery prices than 2023 for sure. Something else I wanted to kind of bring up here is we also get to see Michael Shannon's character. He plays Galen, who's Neckbone's uncle, and just over like the last, I'd say like 2 years, I've really gotten more familiar with this actor. I don't know if that's because he's blowing up or maybe I'm just seeing him in more stuff that I'm digging into. But, he's really great in 9 Perfect Strangers, Bullet Train. He's also, I love
Knives Out.
Yes. And I also love him in this show called Waco, which is, a dramatized exploration of the 1993 standoff between the FBI and ATF and David Koresh's religious faction, the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. But really good in that. But he also is going to be in the sequel to that show, actually. It's coming out in April, called Waco: The Aftermath. But anyway, I should say I've been kind of more on a Michael Shannon like search. So I was really happy that I was kind of able to go back and see some of his earlier work, thanks to Justin's recommendation here today, and see him play Galen. I think he's just a really great actor.
I love Galen's character. I mean, it's his job of going down and searching for trash on the bottom of the river and also mussels and all that kind of stuff. I think it's so cool. I also love like his helmet. His helmet's made out of an old like piece of a water heater.
Is that what that was? Okay, I was trying to figure out what the hell he was wearing.
Yeah, it's a recycled, reclaimed water heater with weights on the end of it to keep him down on the bottom. And what's interesting about that is Nichols actually took a lot of inspiration from a book called The Last River. It's a photographic essay that really depicts a lot of like Mississippi and lower Arkansas life on the river. And there literally is a picture in that book that is this guy in his boat who he goes and he dives to the bottom of the river in this helmet that's made out of a hot water heater.
That's actually really, yeah, because I thought he was really funny. I mean, because he's just kind of this uncle who's got to take care of this kid, and he's not really that responsible of an adult. But he's not like irresponsible. He's just kind of this. They live in like a trailer park and stuff like that. And I remember watching that, some kind of girlfriend come in and out or whatever. And then he just comes out in like his wetsuit. Yeah, and I was like, why is he wearing a wetsuit? Like, what? And I just thought it was really funny. And
I don't know if we want to know.
And speaking of that scene too, I just love how they depict the young boys in this moment. I mean, you have Neckbone just staring at this girl's cleavage. And clearly these kids, they don't know how to handle themselves. And it's also very clear that they're seeking role models because of the vacuum that is not being filled in their lives. And what role model do they glean onto? Mud, this character that isn't a great guy, really, but it's the best they got.
Right. And I think especially Ellis, he's kind of exploring love for the first time, it seems like. But he has, Mud talking about how in love he is with Juniper. And I think that really is, both for Ellis and Neckbone, something that's kind of new to them, just because of Neckbone's situation with his uncle and that role model and that relationship or lack thereof. And then also with Ellis's father and mother, obviously we find out that they are no longer in love. And I'm guessing that relationship hasn't been a great example of a loving relationship for a long time. So I think it's a combination of all these things, but exactly right, Nick. Like that all leads to Mud being something new and fresh and exciting, but also I think hopeful for Ellis, especially when it comes to, maybe love can be something different than what I see as an example around me. And that kind of leads into the next part here I wanted to break down, where, Ellis learns that his parents are heading for a divorce. And this threatens their Old River houseboats. If no longer used its residence by the owner, it will be removed by the River Authority. And then later, at a roadblock, Ellis finds out Mud is a fugitive, but denies having seen him. And that same day, Ellis and Neckbone confront Mud over the discovery. And Mud explains that he did kill a man who had gotten Juniper pregnant and pushed her down a flight of stairs, causing her to lose that child. And from there, the boys decide to help Mud in exchange for his pistol. And he also tells them that a group of bounty hunters is looking for him and that he needs to leave town as soon as possible.
I suspected something like that was going to happen. I was like, okay, this guy's this is not just some weird kind of random dude out in the woods. He's here for a reason, right? And he's waiting on Juniper and all that, and I got that. But then, state troopers looking for him. And the kids are asking him, and he's like, well, no, I didn't know about state troopers, but it doesn't surprise me. And you're just like, okay, that's serious. And, then it turns out he straight up killed a guy. But the way he tells the story, right, and it just speaks to how charismatic the character is. Right, the way he tells the story, the kids just totally buy it. And it is true, but they're just totally on his side. They're like, wow, yeah, this is horrible. Of course he went and did this for the right reasons and all this kind of stuff. And they're just on his side and ready to go. And he's like, all right, we're going to get this boat out of the tree and this is going to be our escape. Yeah, that was really, really cool. Yeah, but it's interesting because you see these multiple layers of Mud kind of being unveiled and kind of unpacked, with these kids, because they keep digging into because you're right, they have this void of father figures, of responsible, or at least figures in their life that they want to be like, and so he's just kind of there, and he's just the best they've got, and and they're just really invested in him, and you see that he does actually kind of care for these kids. He's like, I don't really want to get you involved, but I need your help. And, you see him kind of really take on that role and really start to be that figure for them, even of his own volition, not just kind of by happenstance.
Yeah. And I also kind of want to go back a little bit to Ray McKinnon, because I've seen Ray McKinnon as an actor in a few other films and television series, especially Sons of Anarchy is, I think, the first show where I really was seeing him. But I never really imagined him playing a father. And I think, at least personally, that's why he works so well in this film for me, because he has as his character has a lot going on, and sometimes isn't the best or most loving father figure. And I also, at the same time, empathize with this character situation, because his character, doesn't have any control over his own destiny here. And he's feeling really upset and helpless just because of, the boathouse not being in his name, being in his wife's name, and they're headed toward divorce. And I felt like, even though we didn't get to explore his character very much in the show, that he was a deep character that when we got a few minutes here and there with him, really added to the story. And I think, again, showed us where Ellis is coming from when it comes to looking for a father figure, but then also looking for an example of, as Ellis would put it, true love.
Yeah, honestly, he did kind of surprise me a little bit. And he did a good job, right? Like as playing the part and stuff, like he did a good job. But it was the relatability of that, because I'm sitting there watching this guy and I'm like, man, I know people like this. I know people like this in my own family, and that are just kind of this way, like they're not particularly good men. They're not bad. They just have really bad luck and don't really have any control and just kind of endure. And if anything else, that's probably his one redeeming quality, or maybe the only one he's really got to hold on to, but he just sticks through it, as best he can and just kind of survives,
Yeah, which, it seems like a lot of these characters are, like you said, Justin, just kind of trying to survive, make it day to day. I mean, Neckbone's uncle is like, hey, whatever I find on the bottom of the river is gold to me because I got nothing else. He's got a ceiling fan up there. He's like, it's the best ceiling fan ever. I got it out of the river for free. These people have next to nothing. And so then that kind of leads into Ellis and Neckbone have agreed to help Mud build this boat. And they got to try and find junk that is truly garbage at this point because of the town's economy. But also, Mud sends Ellis to Tom Blankenship, which, he's an older father figure from Mud's childhood, and he sends Ellis there to get some help. So Tom agrees to come talk to Mud. However, upon learning Mud is in trouble over Juniper again, he refuses to help. Mud gives the boys a note for Juniper. They find her motel room where Carver, the brother of the man Mud killed, is physically abusing her. Ellis charges at the man, but is quickly overpowered. Juniper is surprised to see the boys, but she warms up to them when she realizes they're helping Mud. Neckbone and Ellis tell Mud about the man. Mud realizes that the family of the man he's killed is here for revenge. And Carver, his father King, and a handful of bounty hunters stake out Juniper's hotel. They have paid off officers at the local police department as well.
So let's talk about Tom Blankenship for just a minute here. I love the little notes and little nods that they keep making to what kind of inspired this film, being The Adventures of Huck Finn, because Tom Blankenship actually is the name of a man who actually inspired Mark Twain to create Huck Finn. So Tom Blankenship, the real man in real life in history, inspired the character of Huck Finn. And so this is just a nod back to that.
That actually makes so much sense. That's really cool. I like that. I like when people really put those details in there because, they care about their source material and they care about, using it right and doing it justice and stuff. That's actually really neat. And he was a great character. He's just this ornery old man, just lives across the river. Yeah, he was just cool, and then they take him out to Mud and he just lays into him. He just gives him the business, which I thought was really cool because you're probably seeing the oldest, most experienced and wisest character in the whole movie and kind of the voice of reason really show up for the first time and start, speaking some truth to everything. And it's kind of the first time you see that what Mud's doing and saying is not, he's not lying about it really, but it's also like not the whole truth. And so like through, Tom's laying into him and he's like, how many times are you going to do this? And then you start to realize like, oh, like Mud's been doing. He's kind of stuck in this pattern. He's stuck in this cycle of, he's with Juniper, she leaves him, she goes off somebody else, he wins her back or tries to take care of her, something like that, and he's just stuck in this sick cycle, with this woman. Yeah, Tom Blankenship's character, I mean, he's an ornery old man, but he's right more than he's wrong, but nobody listens to him, and you're like, come on, just whatever. But yeah, I loved him. I loved how he was portrayed in this movie and his role in it. Like, he did a great job.
Stealing machine parts and outboard motors from junkyards, the boys help Mud repair the boat. They plan to reunite Juniper with Mud. They relay the plan to Juniper, who agrees to it. However, she instead heads to a bar and flirts with other men. Ellis and Neckbone tell Mud. Ellis then brings a note from Mud to Juniper telling her that it's over between them. Juniper then tells Ellis that Mud is a born liar and she's sick of running away with him. Ellis is dejected, not only because he thought he was helping a couple in love, but furthered by May Pearl's rejection of him in front of her friends and not returning his calls. Ellis confronts Mud and calls him a liar and a coward, and that he turned them into thieves. Running away, Ellis falls into a pit containing cotton mounts and is bitten. Mud jumps in and rescues Ellis. Mud then races to get unconscious Ellis to a clinic on the mainland. Recognizing Mud, one of the hospital employees calls the police, who tip off Carver. It's a lot.
That is a lot, and it's honestly my favorite part of the entire movie because Ellis finally is like everything that is inside of him just comes out because of everything that happens. I mean, May Pearl has rejected him in the most just obscene and just heartbreaking way. And I mean, we've all been there. And it's the worst feeling in the entire world when the girl that you think likes you just doesn't want anything to do with you, and not just that, is embarrassed by you. It's just so heartbreaking. This is something that's gonna be over his head for the rest of his life now.
And in front of everybody, like in front of all of your friends, and it's a small town. I mean, news travels, like everybody knows what's going on, everybody, all that stuff. And I felt so bad for Ellis. I saw that happen. I was like, oh, come on, man. Like you get him dirty. Well, and that's the funny thing too, is like having perspective, not being 14 years old anymore. Like, that something like that's really not going to be a lifetime problem, but it feels like it. And from his perspective, you're right. Like, this is the rest of his life. And he's just like, oh, my life is over. This is awful. The worst thing has ever happened to me. And he's just so upset about it. And you're just like, man. And I think too, I mean, yeah, because this story, the multiple layers and interwoven stories happening in this movie, some are really kind of big with big implications and consequences. Some are very small. And some are very, very small, like a boy liking a girl. They go on like one sort of date, and then like she embarrasses him in front of all of her friends, right? And that, the grand scope of things, it's such a small thing. It doesn't matter that much, but it matters so much, and I really liked how they did that. They kind of like wove that in. Like, that doesn't serve the overall purpose of anything in this movie. That doesn't really have anything to do with Mud or Juniper or anything else. That's just life,
But it does. It has so much to do with Mud and Juniper because shortly after then, Ellis and Neckbone catch Juniper with this other guy at a bar. And it's because of what Ellis has just gone through, the heartbreak that he has gone through, that he knows that because he caught his girl with another guy. Mud's not here to catch his girl with another guy. He's there in the moment. He can be Mud in this moment for Mud. So he has to go and tell Mud. But also at the same time, then he's just so mad at Mud because Mud has been just using them. So I my favorite part is the culmination of all this when Ellis comes towards Mud, just marches up to him, just decks Mud. Like, this guy that's his hero just decks him in the face. It's all just coming out in that moment.
Yeah, because Ellis's entire reality is shattered. I mean, his parents are getting divorced. The girl he's been going out for a week has broken up with him in a very public way. And then, yeah, like you said, Nick, his hero, like his whole purpose that we've been shown in this film, day to day, he feels betrayed and used.
Because I think that a part of it was that he could be the conduit to Mud to save this woman. And I think in that he also took a bit of those feelings that Mud had to be that conduit for Mud. And he's taken it extremely personally that what happens to Mud really is also happening to him too. So Juniper's betrayal isn't just a betrayal on Mud, it's also now a betrayal for Ellis.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. Yeah, because he does kind of identify with Mud, and in some way he's like trying to learn from him and hoping to have a story like Mud's and Juniper's, or so he thinks. And then he kind of sees it start to play out, and you're like, it's not a story you want to emulate.
Because too, and we kind of glossed over this and kind of skipped over this in the last section, is that Ellis also saved Juniper once already here. And so it just, her betrayal in this moment where she's caught with another guy is just put into sevenfold because Ellis is such a part of this story.
Well, and I think too, I mean, we talked a little bit, I mean, these two kids are 14 years old. They're naive. I mean, they don't really know how things work yet. They don't know how people do things yet.
When you love somebody and marry somebody or want to marry somebody, isn't that supposed to last forever?
To a kid, yeah. But, very often it doesn't, because and I think that's one of the things they're really highlighting in this movie is that sometimes people don't want to be saved. Sometimes people don't want to be better. Sometimes they're just content to be the broken people that they are, because that's all they know, or that's all that they think they can be, or whatever. And it just kind of sucks. It's just heartbreaking. And they don't really shy away from that in this at all. They really deal with that and look at it. And you're like, man, that sucks. Like, I want this to be better, but sometimes it just ain't.
I also wanted to talk about that last part, where Mud jumps in and rescues Ellis. We've kind of, at least according to Mud, found out he's been bitten before and gotten the anti-venom so he can't have it again. So this really is like life or death, especially for Mud here jumping in. But I also like the detail where he's like, I'm gonna put my lucky shirt back on before I jump in the snake pit. But yeah, I like you, Nick, I really enjoyed the sequence of events where it's hopping in the boat, it's hopping on that little bike, riding that thing full speed to the clinic. By the way, great dismounts from the bike. Love that. But yeah, I think we really get to see Mud make a choice here, and he chooses Ellis, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right. He has a choice. I mean, he's been hiding on this island for a reason, because he's a wanted man.
He knows it's not just that he's wanted by the law, it's life and death for him too if he's caught by the family of the guy he killed.
Seriously, yeah. And you see them, earlier when they're talking to the kids and Juniper and other people, basically saying, hey, as soon as he sticks his head out of whatever hole he's hiding in, like, we're going to get him. And you see this moment where he has to save Ellis. Like, he's got to stick his head out of that hole and go do the right thing. And that's the cool thing is you see Mud make the right choice for the right reasons and at great risk to himself, bodily harm. Like, he's actually, like, he just dives right in that snake pit, grabs a kid, and just takes off. And that was really, and I hate snakes. I hate snakes so much. And I saw early on, like, he like throws that rock in that stream. I'm like, all right, somebody's falling in the snake pit. I just knew it. I was like, somebody's falling in it. I don't know who it is. But I'm going to hate it. And next thing you know, and it just shocked me so much. Like, you see Ellis just run off and just out of nowhere just falls and trips in there. And I was like, oh no, like, I felt that.
Justin, there's a small part of me that hates you just a little bit for picking this film because it's my worst fear. And you made me have to experience my worst fear for like 2.5 hours.
I mean, honestly, I had no idea that was coming. And as soon as I saw the beginning,
it was like, a big part of this film and I was not okay with it.
No, seriously. And growing up in Texas, I mean, I remember going to summer camp and there was spots where we'd see water moccasins on the river. And I mean, it's terrifying, like snakes. I don't mess with snakes. That ain't.
Yeah, water moccasins. We've got copperheads over here too. Got cottonmouth. Yeah.
That's got rattlesnakes, but at least they make a little noise usually around here.
They aren't swimming in every body of water that is freestanding.
Yes, that would terrify me. I would never go swimming, ever.
And it's true. I mean, the water in the South, and especially the area of Arkansas and the area that we're in, Justin and I are in. I mean, the water is muddy. You can't see the bottom. So I also find that interesting that you have such muddy water, and the movie is called Mud, and the river plays a massive part of this story.
Yeah, it really does in such a cool way. But yeah, no, and this scene was great. I mean, you see that like just really come to a climax of like Mud's gotta do something, and for much of the movie, you know, it's these two kids doing a lot of very adult things and just kind of managing on their own, you know, running around on their motorcycle and their boat and all this kind of stuff. You know, they're definitely in an adult world. And, you know, bunch like when they get tossed out of the bar, I thought that was kind of funny. You know, there's just these 14-year-old kids like walking in on this bar, and you know, it's like a biker thing or something. Anyways. But then, you know, as soon as Mud springs into action, you know, it's kind of reminded me, I was like, there are some situations that, you know, these kids, they can't handle on their own. They just can't. Like, they need a man. They need, you know, a real adult to make that heroic action. And he did. And, you know, he just takes off through those woods. And I was just kind of reminded, like, how necessary that is in these boys' lives, that they need a man in their life to take care of them, to protect them, to teach them. And for a brief moment, you know, they have Mud, right? Kind of teaching them things, showing them things. But then you see him also protect them. You know, when he really has to do it, like he steps up and does that in a really cool way, which kind of shows, you know, he's really not all as bad as maybe we're led to believe, or as bad as he thinks he is. Like, he does have a lot of redeeming qualities. He just made a lot of really stupid decisions.
This sequence of events really redeems Mud's character for me. Up until this point, I was like, wow, like he really is using these kids as Ellis is saying, hey, you made us thieves, you know? But again, I think this really redeems Mud and their character when he makes that decision. All right. So evading his pursuers, Mud gets back to the island where he and Neckbone get the repaired boat into the water. As they agreed before, Mud gives Neckbone a pistol, but without ammunition. Mud wants to say goodbye to Ellis, so Neckbone takes him to the houseboat where he is recovering. While Mud is in Ellis's room, Carver and his posse arrive and start shooting. Tom fires from his boat using his old sniper rifle, killing several attackers from across the river. Mud saves Ellis and tries to get away, but is shot as he dives into the river. The police arrive and find all the posse members dead. One trooper calls King to tell him that his other son is now dead. The morning after the shootout, Tom disappears.
So I love the part with the gun. I mean, this was a deal that Mud made with Neckbone a lot earlier. And Neckbone is like, oh, I've got the best part of this deal. And I love how Mud throughout, how Matthew McConaughey's character kept talking about how his shirt was the thing that protected him, but the second thing was his gun. And this gun is such a huge part. Like, it's the only thing really that really can protect him. He's made this deal with this kid, this 14-year-old kid. Like, what unresponsible person would give a kid a gun? But Mud's not that dumb. Mud knows what he's doing, and he gives this gun and doesn't renege on his deal and gives the gun to Neckbone, but being a actually responsible adult, gives him the gun without the bullets. I love that little detail.
Yeah, it was a nice little twist on the arrangement. Also, I watched this movie twice in the last 2 weeks preparing for this episode, and I was wearing headphones a second time. I got AirPod Pros. Highly recommend them. The noise cancellation is incredible. But I had that going on, just sitting there. And even the second time I watched this film, there's that first gunshot that goes off at Ellis's house. And it literally made me jump in my chair. Even I knew it was coming, but it just made me jump so much because it really cracks that whole scene. It's an intimate scene there. You know, he's saying goodbye to Ellis. I just think that was so well done. I mean, it got me the second time I watched the film.
Yeah, no, it about scared the piss out of me. Because you sit there and you're watching this scene, and he's sneaks in the window, and they're talking. It's like, oh, we finally got the boat in the water and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, this dude pulls up with a shotgun, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what? And next thing you know, like it's a shootout, like in their houseboat. And that shocked me because I was sitting there thinking, like, there's no way that these guys would be brazen enough to just shoot up this random house with a family in it, just trying to kill this guy. And sure enough, they were. Like, they just showed up and they grabbed Neckbone and they got him and they just started blowing the place up, just trying to kill this one dude. I thought too, I mean, it was interesting because we're living in a day and we got John Wick Chapter 4 out with like these 20-minute long, like super in-depth action scenes and all this kind of stuff. And this movie doesn't really have that. There's not really like a choreographed action, whatever. Like, these bunch of dudes who have hunting shotguns, they're just fighting it out, and there's no particular whatever going on, but it's so realistic because it's just a bunch of people just trying to kill each other and some people just trying to get out and survive. And I thought that was really cool because it's very nitty gritty. It's like, it's just all these dudes trying to kill Mud. Mud's just trying to make it out alive and protect Ellis. And yeah, I thought it was cool too because Ellis's dad shows up. Like he pops out with a revolver and he starts taking shots. He actually gets shot. Or like gets grazed by it, and so he's out there protecting his wife, and then of course Tom Blankenship just leans over with his hunting rifle. It's got that big scope on it. He's just blowing people out, and that was I thoroughly enjoyed that because he's over here just laying them out. And that was fantastic.
Yeah, boss move over there. So next, Ellis's parents decide to separate. He and his mother move to an apartment in town, and their houseboat is demolished while his father gets a new job far away. He tells Ellis to take care of his mother as he departs, showing a more mature and changed attitude toward their situation. Before he leaves, he tells Ellis, "I love you," to which Ellis replies, "I love you too." Ellis sees some teenage girls in his new neighborhood and smiles. He is uncertain of Mud's fate, but still believes he was protecting Juniper. Mud is revealed to be alive and recovering on the repaired boat driven by Tom. Many days have passed, and the film ends with them looking ahead at the mouth of the Mississippi River, and south of that, the Gulf of Mexico. I really enjoyed how they decided to wrap this up. I honestly had no idea how it was going to end, but I really enjoyed that we got to see Ellis accept it might not be as close distance-wise to his best friend's Neckbone. He's also moving into town. He doesn't want to be a townie. He shares that earlier. But when his father tells him, look out for his mother and that he loves him, I think it's a little bit of a change in his relationship with his father. Positive one, I would say. And then I also really enjoyed the fact that as he and his mother are going into their new apartment together, Ellis sees some teenage girls in that neighborhood and he smiles. I think at least as an audience member, that's kind of signaling that Ellis has learned a lot in the last 2 weeks or whatever the story has taken place in. And he's like, hey, like just because love doesn't work out for other people doesn't mean it's not going to for me. And he still has hope for the future, I guess, in that regard. He's also accepting a lot of change that's occurring as well.
Well, that, but also that he's still a teenage boy. Like, yeah, his heart might have just been broken, but come on, there are other fish in the sea.
Which is funny because the man's definitely got a type. And that was just really funny. Well, and I saw that, that girl kind of waves at him and all that. I'm just kind of thinking to myself, like, he's going to be all right. He's going to be fine. And it was just, it was very, very hopeful ending in a story that definitely couldn't have gone that way. Right. And it didn't have to end that way. But I also really, really enjoyed how they wrapped things up. I found myself after the shootout, kind of seeing his dad kind of step up a little bit. I was kind of hoping like, oh, well, maybe this is going to fix their marriage. And it didn't. One kind of heroic moment doesn't necessarily negate a whole long time of other issues, and stuff like that. And honestly, man, like, his dad's dropping off. And I've been in that situation. I've been in that truck having that conversation. And that was, that took me right back, and like I almost started tearing up a little bit. I was like, man, and they did a great job with that. Yeah, because you just kind of like, change happens.
I really liked that scene with his dad at the end there too, because I think it took him almost losing his son, not just from the snake bite, but also the shootout too, that for him to realize that he really needed to step up as a father and actually be there for his son, not just be so dismissive of his son. His son up to this point has just been kind of a tool in his fishing business, not really had a relationship with him, but he realizes that, hey, he could lose this kid in a blink of a second when he's not there. and he's really got to step up. And so he says, I'll see you next week.
Yeah. No, seriously. That was cool. That was a good ending. And then, and you're right. You got Mud and Tom taking the boat down the river, in a way that kind of mirrors, the two kids coming up on the Mississippi River. Tom goes down and says, hey, you got to see this. And there's the Gulf of Mexico. And you're just like, oh. And that was such a good way to end that, to kind of bring that all around circle, and ultimately I think too, it was probably the best ending that they could have had for it in the sense that, turns out Tom was right. Juniper really was very selfish and only cared about herself, and Mud just needed to get out of that just entirely and cut ties. And Tom kind of found that in himself to take care of Mud too, and to finally kind of step up again there and actually take him. And that was very cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. Overall, I think Mud is a powerful coming of age story that explores a lot of themes, including love, loyalty, family. It's also exploring the realities of life in this small southern town. But the characters are so well drawn and the story is so engaging that even though it has little lulls here and there in the story, the suspense is still there, coupled with some action that really, at least for me, kept me as an audience member really engaged throughout the whole film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed the movie overall. Yeah, just watching that, you're invested. Like, you care about the people, you care about their lives and their stories and what's going to happen, and you hope for them, Like, I found myself really wanting a good ending for these people, really wanting and caring about what was going to happen to them, and in just the best way. And I thought it was so neat. And it was a beautiful movie that just, you're put there in it with them and you're watching it and you're feeling all the things with them. And it was just, I was pleasantly surprised by it. I kind of thought in the back of my mind watching this movie, I was like, all right, this may not be like that good because I haven't heard a whole lot about this movie. It's just kind of been on my watch list for a time. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by how good it actually was and how much I really enjoyed it. Not because it's like a super enjoyable movie, but because it's such a relatable and a real story with real people and how much it actually mattered to me.
Yeah, it sounds like you were able to view the film and see some large parallels to experiences you had in your own life, which I think is something always really awesome and unique with film when it's able to do that for people. I think that's one of the great things about film in general, is that everybody can watch the same film but have completely different takeaways just because of our personal experiences in life. I really enjoyed that this story was well done, in my opinion. But I'd say even more specifically that the writing was great, because something I was reflecting on a lot after watching this film, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier when we first started this podcast episode, was that kind of going back a few years and checking out a film that came out about 12 years ago, writing, in my personal opinion, seems to have taken a back seat to spectacle and ambiance lately, and in at least a lot of films. Everything has to be a big and visual experience. And if we visually see something shoved in our face that's pretty, we're expected to focus on that more than the writing, or more on what the writing is conveying sometimes. And I think it's great that we're able to have a visually stunning spectacle, but we need writing to focus on the characters more like this film does and less on visuals sometimes.
And I think that there is a space in which writing has taken center stage, and that is a lot in the TV space now, the television space, the streaming space, and taken a bit of a backseat when it comes to actual feature films.
Yeah. Like from where I'm sitting, like Hollywood is kind of struggling a bit when it comes to writing as a whole. We have great examples here and there, like House of Dragon, The Last of Us, but
Succession, Shrinking, Ted Lasso.
100%. There's great content out there. But I think what a lot of times what happens with especially like these big films, is like, for example, on like a sports team, you can pull the best players possible to make the quote unquote best team. But if it's not winning championships or, going to playoffs, then you start questioning, hey, what's kind of going on here? And I think if the plays aren't drawn up right, then it's not going to work. If the script in a film or a television series and the story aren't drawn up correctly, then the same thing is going to happen to that film or that series. And I kind of got thinking about that when it came to this film because I really enjoyed the writing and the attention to character development and detail that they completed in this movie. And maybe that's just my personal experience with films lately, kind of coming into play here. It very well can be. But I had a really good time with this film. It is something that, like you mentioned, Justin, it has been on my watch list for probably at least like 6 years. I just haven't gotten around to watching it. So I'm really thankful, for the podcast where I can have somebody come and be like, I want to review this film. And then that gives us the opportunity to do so. I think it's something that I really appreciate. And I'm glad you picked this one out, Justin.
Yeah, I love this film, and this has been a film that has not been on my watch list for many, many years. I mean, I knew kind of around the time when it came out. I knew of this film. I've seen it on lists of films people need to watch for years. I've just never really had the urge to see it. And when Justin suggested this film for us to watch, and I actually watched it finally, I was like, why has this never been on my list? Because it's an amazing film, and something now after I've watched is a film that's going to be something I suggest that other people watch. It's a great film. I had a great time. The subject matter was very compelling. It showcases a world in which I have never really found interest in, but showcases it in a really beautiful way, a way that I probably wouldn't see on face value, that really helps me to understand a world and a culture that is not showcased as much because people live like it. It's extremely a real kind of story that could have totally been a true to life, true story, and a story that plays out probably every day. So I loved it. I had a great time. Would not have watched it without this podcast. So thank you, Justin, for suggesting this film for sure. And thanks for having me on as a guest, Chris, because it was great. It was a fun time.
Yeah, I was really happy to get a chance to kind of pick a movie and just pick something like none of us had seen, and the opportunity to talk about it, and then just really kind of dive into it. That was a lot of fun. It does remind me of this other movie I saw about 2 years ago called Peanut Butter Falcon with Shia LaBeouf, and very similar kind of tone to it. It's kind of a coming of age story, just kind of this two bros gallivanting around. That one's in the Outer Banks. Similar movie, but and this thing too, like both of these kind of movies are ones like you don't rewatch like there's no pizzazz to it, but there's a lot of emotion and matter to it. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie very much.
Awesome. Well, I did want to give you a chance, Justin and Nick, to let people know where people can hit you up online. Where can people find you online, Justin?
Actually, I don't know if they can. I don't really have I don't have Facebook or Instagram anymore.
Hey, that's okay too.
There's probably an old Snapchat account from high school that I haven't touched and I forgot the password for years ago. So I'm probably getting all sorts of weird spam messages there that I just will never find.
If you want to talk to Justin, come on the podcast.
There you go. That works. Good enough for me.
You can find him here.
Let's talk movies. Movies are fun.
Yeah, and you can find me as always at nick.fleeto.leach.
Awesome. And if you want to hit me up on the Cinema Club Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/the Cinema Club TCC. Please also listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And please leave us a review on iTunes. It really helps us reach more listeners. And please invite even more new members to join the club. Also, feel free to message me or Nick on Facebook if you would like to be on the podcast. And finally, we are completely supported by you, our listeners. So if you are loving the show and are feeling generous, please consider clicking the support button on our website. You can check that out at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/the Cinema Club. Thanks so much, and we will see you on the next one.